Hello again, Steve here with a few comments about two politicians. At least they are politicians at this point, as far as I know. One is very well known, the other not so much, by people internationally anyway. The first one, of course, the Donald J. Trump, and the second one, Mad Max. Maxime Bernier Dubos. Anyway, he's the new Canadian federal prime minister to be, at least want to be. Now, the reason I wanted to talk about these two is just to throw out the question, because to get clickbait, if nothing else. Is Donald Trump a Nazi, and is Maxime Bernier a communist? Well, let's have a look at that. First of all, Nazi, right? Nazi party. What did it used to stand for? What did it really mean? It meant the National Socialist Germans Worker Party, right? That somehow Nazi, I guess, was a short form for that originally. Now, I was just watching something recently, and Trump has this thing called the National Council for American Workers. Trump has always been, from the optics that I've seen anyways, been pro-worker. He won the election on the working class, right? Because that's who votes conservative typically, is the working class. I don't mean the pseudo-government working class, the welfare with an excuse class. I mean the people who produce, right? And that's the workers. They voted for Trump, and Trump, the Rust Belt and so on, he cleaned up, right? And Trump is a socialist. I've said this before. He's a business Democrat from New York, and he's a big-time socialist. He's a big spender. He's big on the military. He's big on big government, lots of police and the border and everything else. And he wants to make America great again by getting people working, right? Supporting the workers. And his approach to socialism is that it's all about management. So he's going to manage socialism better, right? Where have we seen this before? I'm not putting a moral judgment pro or con on it. I'm just saying, just if we think about it. And now he's got this council called the National Council for American Workers. So he wants to put workers first. Making workers great again, kind of thing, right? The next guy, Mad Max. That's the moniker that people have put on him here. And I think it's a great moniker, actually, for somebody who's a rebel. He was basically in the Conservative Party of Canada, this guy, Maxime Bernier Dubos, and he was basically going to get turfed out for being politically incorrect, right? And because it was a leadership convention, the way it works in the Canadian system is they have kind of a runoff election within the party to see who will be the leader of the party, and then the leader of the party becomes the prime minister if the party wins. And he came second. This other guy, Andrew Scheer, from the prairies somewhere, I believe, he came first, and they didn't see eye to eye. And eventually, Scheer basically told Bernier that none of his input was going to matter anymore. But yet he had this huge following within the party. So he basically said, screw you, Scheer, and the rest of you guys are going to turf me out of the party anyway. I just quit and I'll form my own party. So his party he's kind of a libertarian guy. But you wouldn't know it by the sounds of his party. And he's a French-Canadian guy, so I don't know if maybe the sound of the party got lost in the translation or whatever, but get this. The People's Party of Canada. To me, that sounds like a communist party. I mean, that would have been a great party for Bernie Sanders to form in the United States. The People's Party of America or whatever. So, but I don't think he's a communist, and he probably has a lot of good things to say about, quote unquote, making Canada great again, making it more free enterprise in terms of a state, right? Like smaller state. I don't advocate for any state, but I'd prefer a smaller state to a bigger state because I prefer less violence than more violence. It's that simple. But Maxime Bernier, honestly, I would reconsider the naming of your party. It doesn't sound great, at least in the English translation. Have a lot of interesting respect for, for what you're trying to do. And, Beauce is known, Beauce, by the way, is an area of Quebec. It's rural Quebec. If you want to go to Beauce sometime, you'll hear French country music. It's really cool. And it's basically a farming community. It's always been very, very conservative. And incidentally, one of the most productive areas of Quebec. No surprise, because conservatives are the ones who produce, right? And so right away, he's got something to share. And I think he could very well do well in Quebec, because he's a strong, charismatic guy, and it's very hard for for a conservative party to do well in Quebec. But when somebody, like we remember Lucien Bouchard, who started the party, the Bloc Québécois, which was a sort of, at least in name anyways, it was right-leaning, but it wasn't really right-leaning. It was probably center-left, actually, but for Quebec, that's actually quite right. So he'll do well in the rural parts of Quebec, probably Maxime Bernier will. And in a lot of Canada, though, it's hard to say, because the right will be split. I believe that Justin Trudeau will probably win again as a minority or a majority government, which might be good in the long run, because the more destruction they can do, which they're just laying waste to so much of what was Canada, they will dig their grave even deeper, right? So maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. But anyway, my suggestion to Maxime Bernier, Mad Max, change the name of your party. And, the National Socialist American Workers' Party, that is what Donald Trump is leaning. Maybe in a good way, though, right? Because he stands up for workers, those who produce, and that's better than clobbering them, right? So he wants to get workers more productive, get people off welfare, and, maybe the claim that people make that he is a Nazi is right, technically. But what most people consider to be a Nazi is just an excuse to clobber people and censor them and all that sort of stuff. My gist on this is to allow everybody free speech. Hey, if you think somebody's idea is terrible, if you think Donald Trump's idea is terrible, if you think Maxime Bernier's ideas are terrible, promote the message and let everybody see how terrible it is. Don't take it off the air. What that means is what you've got is shit ideas, if you got to take down other people's ideas rather than put your own forward. So anyway, the question remains, is Donald Trump a Nazi? Is Maxime Bernier a communist? Well, by the sounds of Maxime's party, he sounds like one. I don't think he is. And Donald Trump, he's not what people think of as a Nazi, but I do believe he's running the National Socialist America's Workers' Party. Talk again soon. Bye for now.